Hi, I'm David with EV World News. We talk about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. Today, Bill and I have a special guest. We have the outgoing director of the Loan Program Office, the Department of Energy, Jigar Shah. Welcome to our show today, Jigar.
Thanks for having me.
Now, you're also known, you were the founder of SunEdition?
Yep, and I'm known as a friend of Bill Moore's.
That's really important. That's really important. And Bill is the original OG electric vehicle website guy. I mean, Bill's been doing this for 27 years, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. I always laugh. We get all these comments on YouTube like we don't know what we're talking about. It's like, well, who's a bigger expert on this than Bill? Okay.
No,
Who are you going to
exactly.
find that knows more about electric vehicles than Bill does?
Exactly.
Okay. He may not be able to tear apart an electric motor.
Thank you.
Yeah, but it's just always, funny that these people think, oh, you guys don't know anything. It's like, yeah, it is quite interesting, and I'll even have them debate about our engineer that comes on. Like he doesn't know what he's talking about. It's like he literally consults for utility companies, states, and countries.
Well, these days, the definition of an expert is ever changing.
No.
So, as I understand now, are you no longer the director?
No, when a president, leaves office, all of the appointees that he appointed also,
Okay.
leave with him. So we all are asked to submit our letter of resignation, and they are normally all accepted by the incoming administration.
Okay. I did not know how that process worked, because I know that right now that incoming administration, their cabinet positions are all going through, the Senate.
Yeah, there are thousands of political appointees in an administration, some of which have to be confirmed by the Senate, and others don't. The president can just put that person in place.
So when you came in, were you put in that position by Jennifer Granholm, or were you put in by President
You're
Biden?
always put in place by President Biden.
Oh, okay.
Every political appointee is technically a presidential appointee. Now, I can imagine that Jennifer Granholm may have selected me, but you're officially put in place by the Presidential Personnel Office.
Well, so we're on here, and as I said, we talk about electric vehicles and green energy. I love talking about other things, solar, wind, things like that, and how
Sure.
they affect things. So let's start out talking about successes from the Loan Program Office. And I'd like to know what you think were some of the better projects you guys got involved with, what kind of lending, and how that looks. So,
well, yeah, let's start with the Loan Programs Office exists to help people do big things, right? And
right.
that in general, when you think about the loan that Tesla took out in 2009, right, there was nobody in their right mind that was going to give them a $465 million loan. And so they took one out from the Loan Programs Office and repaid it, which was great. And I think when you look at the next set of loans that were done even back then, right, part of the reason why the Loan Programs Office had this program was because a lot of folks were moving to Mexico, and we needed a program to try to keep people here in the United States. And so Ford used the program, and Nissan used the program, and others, right? And so in this particular 4 years, there were a lot of battery manufacturing facilities, and the question was, are they going to go to Mexico, or are they going to happen in the United States? And our program was used to put a lot of those battery manufacturing facilities in place in the United States. And so there was a big loan to the LTM platform with General Motors, and the Blue Oval SK platform with Ford, and the Star Plus platform with Stellantis. But then we also did a lot of critical minerals loans, right? So Thacker Pass in Nevada, and Ioneer in Nevada as well. And then we had a conditional commitment to the energy source minerals folks in the Salton Sea. But we also did graphite processing in Vidalia, Louisiana. But we also did supply chain, so Aspen Aerogels in Georgia, that helps to keep fire risk down, right, from their thermal barrier material. NTech battery separators in Indiana. And the list goes on and on. But I think that when you think about the full battery supply chain, we were part of a lot of that. And then we had other grant making offices at DOE that did a lot of that work as well. But today we're on track to 400 gigawatt hours of battery manufacturing capacity here in the United States by 2027, all the critical minerals that would feed them, plus all of the other pieces that would go into them. And so I think we will have a largely independent supply chain by the end of the decade.
Nice. Are any of those battery companies, so here's one of the things, it seems like this battery manufacturing takes a long time to go from start to being online. Are any of these guys online and producing?
Oh yeah, Altium already is online and producing. I think Blue Oval's first facility is online and producing.
Panasonic down in the Kansas has started delivering cells.
Yep. Yeah, you've got the existing gigafactories that are producing, right? And so yeah, we probably have something on the order of 150 to 190 gigawatt hours worth of batteries that are already producing.
Nice.
Yeah. Can we just to bring people up to speed, maybe, Jigar, sort of explain a little bit of the background of the Loan Program Office and sort of its scope and how that contributes to the national good, so to speak?
Yeah, so it was started by, Republicans in the Senate and the House in 2005 during the Energy Policy Act under Bush. And the whole purpose of it was there was a recognition by Congress at the time that we invent everything here in the United States, but we just don't commercialize any of it here. Right. So we always license it to Asia or Europe or other places to be scaled up. And so therefore, all of our R&D that we spend money on doesn't really lead to job creation here in the United States. And so we needed something that wouldn't compete with the private sector, but actually step in when the private sector was unwilling to. That started with the Title 17 programs, which is how we fund nuclear projects or geothermal projects, or at the time, solar and wind projects, right? Because the private sector wasn't doing those projects, or batteries, et cetera. And then later we got the Advanced Technology Vehicle Manufacturing Program. And that program was really designed to make sure that all of our factories don't go to Canada and Mexico. And that we left a lot more factories here in the United States. And so that program doesn't require innovation, although there is a lot of innovation in most of these loans that we did. But that just requires onshoring and reshoring here in the United States. All of the programs from the Loan Programs Office are designed only for projects here in the United States. So we can't fund anything overseas. When I came into office, there were about $34 billion worth of loans that we had already completed. During my 4 years in office, the team did about $61 billion worth of new loans, which is great. And we processed another $40 billion or so worth of conditional commitments that'll get, closed sometime this year. Okay.
Now, when you say close this year, I mean, the White House came out with a announcement. I think it takes effect at 5 o'clock this afternoon, Eastern time, to, I assume, temporarily suspend payments to those programs. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, the announcement that came out of the Office of Management and Budget has nothing to do with the Loan Programs Office or energy, right? It has to do with the fact that there's a desire to invalidate the entire purpose of the U.S. government. And so they've banned USDA from sending food aid to Africa. They've banned, folks at the State Department from doing work that they do. They've banned the Department of Education from reimbursing your local school district that is taking care of a special needs child, right? There's all sorts of things that the U.S. government does, and they've banned any money from leaving the U.S. government for those purposes, right? And that's, something they want to take to court, and they're going to figure that out. My sense is that, the sanctity of U.S. contracts is probably a good thing, but the court will decide whether that's true or not.
Right. So how does the, let's say I have a project here in the United States. What was the process that I as a company would have to go through to apply for a loan, and what was kind of the procedures there?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same as a commercial bank, right? Like, what's your project, right? and how do you expect to pay us back, right? So
Yeah.
it wasn't any more complicated than that. But you can imagine that folks who can't get money from a commercial bank, usually, right, or in the case of ATVM, can't get it as low cost as us, are generally ill prepared to fill out the paperwork, right? And so they required a lot of mentorship. And the average loan size out of our office was $2 billion, right? Um, so figuring out how to help them fill out the paperwork and give us the information we needed was something we had to do. We couldn't lower our standards. We had to raise their ability
Raise theirs.
to do their work, right? And so that was a lot of the work that we had to do. Some of the folks obviously know what they're doing, whether it was Ford or Stellantis or GM or others. But there are lots of other companies who were younger in their maturity cycle, and there was a lot of work that we had to do to get their game up to where we needed it to be.
Yeah.
Average loan is $2 billion. Yeah, I'd like to think they had, they knew what they were doing, right?
Well, the thing about this country, right, is that we just haven't believed in ourselves in 40 years, right? I mean, I think that if you talk to the average person who's in the invention space, they're like, yeah, we know how to invent stuff here, but we don't know how to make stuff here.
Mhm.
Right. And so, the making stuff happens in China or Germany or other
Right.
places. Right. And so, helping people understand that, we needed to gain our confidence back around how do we do big things in this country was something we had to do. But the $2 billion number is a pretty standard number. I mean, I think, you guys have followed Tesla for a long time.
Mhm.
I mean, the amount of money they were losing every year in the 2014, 2015, 2016 timeframe was certainly in the billion to $2 billion to $3 billion a year range.
Right.
Right. And so that is what it takes to really commercialize these kinds of technologies. And when you get to the other side, you're making that much money every year.
Right. No, I get that. It's interesting looking at the success of Tesla. Bill and I look at a lot of hopeful companies like Canoo just went bankrupt. We've seen a few others. You had was it Workhorse?
Sure.
Nicola's not done too well. There's been a lot of companies that we see. They have good ideas, but they just can't ever quite get over the hump of where they're. Or a good example right now is Aptera. So Bill and I are like, hey, somebody step in and help Aptera. They're a 3-wheeled solar powered car, 2-seater. You
Yeah, but
familiar with it?
they don't really have a customer base. I mean, the thing that I think people just don't understand about the car industry, which I think you guys understand, is that selling 1,000 units only
Mhm.
works if you're making luxury sports cars like Bugattis,
Mhm.
right? If you're making something that's at an affordable price point for consumers, the number is 400,000 units a year.
Wow.
That's when Tesla became profitable, was
Yeah.
400,000 units a year. Rivian is not at 400,000 units a
Yeah.
year, but
Mhm.
they're heading in the right direction. And if their R2 comes out, then I think they will likely have a price point that might be able to attract that many sales per year, right?
Right.
But Lucid, Canoo, Workhorse, right? None of those folks were on track to 400,000 units a
No.
year. So then the question becomes, what are you, right? If you're a glorified bicycle that basically just puts a rain shield on yourself, okay, maybe you could just make that in like a car, sort of like repair shop, right? And maybe you could just do it by hand and it's fine or whatever. But if you're going to make like a fully automated line and all this other stuff, having 1,000 firm pre-orders doesn't get you there.
Yeah. Well, Aptera's in I think was it 60,000 pre-orders, but that's
No,
a far no.
no. They have 60,000 people who said that they would give them their email address and maybe a $20 check. And that's fully
Ah,
refundable. And if you talk to Lawrence Berkeley or you talk to other people who've done the math, less than 3% of those people convert. Right.
Yeah.
And so,
oh,
like,
that's sad.
and it's not, but it is just truth. Right. The thing that, like, I love the fact that we have a Kickstarter nation. I
Mhm.
love the fact that you can make some cool new backpack or pair of blue jeans or an Aptera and get everyone to like crowdsource $1,000 or $20 worth of deposits. That's great. But when you talk about something that you and I both know that we're talking about, which are electric vehicles,
Mhm.
right? There's going to be a lot of carnage. just like there was in the 1910s and 1920s and 1930s. A lot of those folks went out of business, and some of those brands stayed alive, like Oldsmobile or Buick or all those people, right? They got absorbed by General Motors. But a lot of those brands died and you've never heard of them. The same thing is true with the steel industry. The same thing is true with the railroad industry. The same thing is true with lots of people who do what we all think of as infrastructure, right? And
Right.
so that process of people dying is not a bad thing. We don't want to save them all. Like, that's capitalism. What we want is a sufficient number of models for consumers to buy so that they feel like they have choice, right? So they're not just picking one car, but they've got 8 cars to choose from. And we're there now.
Oh, we certainly are. We certainly are. Bill and I cover a lot of interesting models. A little while back, we were covering Sony has this new car called the Afeela that they showed off at CES.
Yeah.
And they're starting to get pre-orders for it, but it's $90,000. Sony wants to enter the EV car space in that top tier of
Why wouldn't you?
sedans.
Of course you would. Why would you start your EV journey with a $10,000 car?
Well, it's not so much that I'm suggesting they start with a $10,000 car. Their mistake, in my opinion, is that they're choosing to do a sedan, which is Lucid's mistake. I feel
Yeah,
they
I
should
mean,
have been coming in with an SUV.
yeah, I mean, clearly Americans love SUVs, but I've got a good friend of mine who will only drive sedans, and so maybe there's a niche market that they can exploit there. I mean, look, I hear you, and far be it from me to like claim to be an expert in any of these things, right? I mean, I know how infrastructure works, but I don't know how to design a car. So
No,
I'll let them do that. But I think the bigger thing for me is just the fact that we have so much competition today in this space makes me confident that this electric vehicle future, which frankly is just a high performance, better car future, is like unstoppable now.
it is. There's no question. I just can't see where anything could prevent EVs from taking over at this point. And I think that's a good thing. But we get a lot of criticisms of, EVs can't do this or do that. Most of it's just wrong.
Well, or maybe it's right? I mean, maybe it's right, but ultimately, you and I both know that the vast majority of people who buy an F-150 truck take it to the mall and back, right? They never
Right.
carry a boat trailer or whatever it is. So, look, I agree with people. If you're carrying a boat or other things on a regular basis, it does reduce your mileage to
Right.
if you have an EV. But the vast majority of miles that are driven by F-150, trucks are not hauling anything, right? So, like, I understand that in edge cases that electric vehicles are not quite there yet, right? And some people feel like fast charging doesn't work for them, and and all these other things, and I totally get it. But I think you and I both know that for 50, 60, 70% of all the cars purchased every year, most folks are just driving them to work and back, getting groceries every once in a while. And what we have today is awesome for those people.
No, I'm with it. It's funny though, but all things, even things like charging. There's new tech coming out. We can see where in 5 years people are going to be charging in about a third of the time it takes now.
Yeah, I agree with you, but let's be honest with ourselves, right? The Tesla experience is seamless, right? So, like, I love the Tesla experience when I go to visit the national parks every spring break with my son. We only rent Teslas because they always work. I have a CCS EV at home. And, like when my parents were in the market, I told them, no chance you should buy an EV. You should buy a plug-in hybrid because they're like 76 years old and they don't want to carry a 40-pound CCS charging cord at a DC fast charger. And so they're plugged in their garage at 110. They drive less than 34 miles a day. So they're at 95% of their miles are electric. And when they want to drive to North Carolina or New York, they just fill up on gas, which is what they're used to. And I think that's fine. And the fact that the state of California is mandating the plug-in hybrid vehicles this year have 50 miles of range means that for like 99% of consumers, they should just get a plug-in hybrid vehicle. And then their life doesn't change all that much, right? They plug in it at home and then they like fill it up on gas on long road trips. And I don't even have to teach them about fast charging.
Right.
Right.
No,
And like,
there
that's
definitely is
fine.
some simplicity to that.
And on top of that, who wants a 150 kilowatt hour battery in their truck? I mean, what the hell? Like, you might as well have a 50-mile range battery that's whatever it is, like 27 kilowatt hours in your truck. And that probably meets almost all of your needs, right? And so, like, why would you carry around a 150 kilowatt hour battery pack everywhere you're going? So, part of what I think we need to do is to take away all the tribalism in this industry. And those of us who are super excited about the DC fast charging in 1/3 the time, you and I can like nerd out about that. And for the rest of the people who just don't care, they can just fill up on level 1 charging in their garage.
Yeah. I did, by the way, I did, I got my Fiat 500e back in 2019. And for 3 years, I only charged it at 110.
Yeah. I mean, you don't drive that much and you get, whatever it is, you get like 50 miles a day of range for at 110.
Nice. So when you and Bill started out on this journey years ago, did you ever imagine yourself being in the middle of a political firestorm?
Well, I don't know what firestorm you're talking about. I think Bill and I, from the first moment we talked, which was probably 1999 or something like that, I think both of us had a fascination for commercialization, right? Me on the solar side, right? I was working on solar at the time, and Bill on the EV side. In 1999, the technology was ready for both technologies, right? Solar was fully technologically mature, like the costs weren't low yet, but the technology is mature. And EVs were the same. Like EVs were fully technologically mature, right? You had the EV1, you had like those S10 pickup truck conversions with lead acid batteries. Like we had all sorts of stuff, right? And it worked. Right. It all worked, right? And so I think a lot of what we talked about was commercialization. And some of that is finance, which is my background. And, some of that is the air cover that you need to allow for consumers to accept these new technologies, which is Bill's, expertise, right? Which was giving people comfort that they were not necessarily out on a limb by themselves, that they had a whole group of people who were thinking and feeling the same way that they did, and they could all jump in the swimming pool together to be a first, early adopter. And I think both of us taught each other stuff.
Yeah, you were at the time that we met, you were working for BP Solar, right?
That's right. Yeah. So
and then went to have a talk with Goldman Sachs, and then from that, SunEdition emerged.
Yeah, that's right. So, I taught Bill finance and he taught me communications and media. So
Nice.
It's been a long and fruitful partnership and friendship.
All right. So do you think the momentum you built at the loan program office is going to stall now?
Never. I mean, look, I think that again, look, the thing with the Biden administration is that we had maybe 500,000 cars that were sold in 2020, right? The last year of the Trump administration. And, now we're at a full, like 12%. Yeah. Of all cars sold or something. Yeah. I think we hit 1.5 million last year.
Oh, okay. That would be including plugins.
Yeah.
That would include plugins.
Plug-in hybrids, of course. Yeah. And so, I think, so we are way higher today than we were then. I think the infrastructure is far more profitable today than it was then, right? Back then, the DC fast chargers were 5% utilization. Today, EVgo in their conference call said that they're at 24% utilization.
Oh,
Oh,
really?
wow.
Right. And so that means that like they're actually profitable at like 18% or 17% utilization.
Oh, that's amazing news. That's
So,
amazing news.
yeah. So like I think that when you think about how this ecosystem is coming together, it's coming together beautifully. I think when you think about we had CCS and NACS, now it looks like everyone's moving to NACS.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which I think is great, right? So there'll be one thing. Now, we're still going to have all the same problems that CCS had, right? Which was Tesla worked because it was a closed ecosystem. Now that they have to support everyone else's software and all that stuff, like we'll see how that works, right? But we'll get through it. And so, I am very bullish that that we have achieved irreversible momentum, which I don't think was true in 2020. But I think today we have achieved irreversible momentum. And I think when you look at Amazon Prime and all of their last mile delivery trucks, they will tell you that it is so much cheaper per mile to deliver packages that way that they will never go back. Right. And the same thing is true with Walmart. And the same thing is true with all the other folks. Like, like their infrastructure has to catch up. All that stuff has to happen. But Uber as well, like the Uber drivers who drive EVs are like, we make more money. Like it's the total cost of ownership is lower. So that not all that stuff was true in 2020.
Yeah, I've stopped local Amazon Prime drivers around here, and had chats with them, and all of them love the trucks.
Yeah, but
I've
also
had
next
one
generation design. Go ahead.
I've had one tell me that he felt he was being punished when they made him drive the petrol vans because the EVs are both more comfortable. There's a whole bunch of things they don't have to do in the summertime. The air condition, they keep stopping, right? But they can keep the air conditioner running in
Yes.
the Rivians, and they can't. The other keeps shutting off. So other ones they're like really hot inside the vans, and the Rivian's actually comfortable to ride around in the
I
summertime.
have police officers saying the same thing to me. Police officers basically saying that, like they have to idle their cars all the time. So they get 3 miles a gallon on those cars. And when they go to an EV, it's a way better experience.
Yeah, whole different experience because the mileage on the EV doesn't go down quite the same way as it does on the gas car sitting there idling.
Yeah. So I just feel very strongly that that technology that is better for consumers wins the day, right? And you see that with solar, you see that with batteries, you see that with wind power, you see that with EVs, you see that with lots of different technologies that we have today, and they are now racing to get deployed as fast as physically possible, right? Which I think is great.
What of the technologies that LPO has funded excites you the most?
Well, there's so many, right? I mean, I think when you think about like what Aspen Aerogels is doing in Georgia, right? I mean, this is a technology that was invented via NASA to create a new thermal barrier for astronauts in their suits, right? And then over time, they figured out that their thermal barrier was so safe that the oil and gas industry started using it. And now, you're using it for NMC battery packs to make sure the thermal runaway gets controlled, et cetera. And now, with this new plant that they're building in Georgia, they're going to be 10xing their production, right? They were already a profitable company, but now they're going to be hugely profitable and much bigger. And as a result, this thermal barrier material is going to get into 45 other applications, not just EV batteries, right?
Nice.
But I think, the other thing is when you look at like what Monolith Materials is doing in Halem, Nebraska, they're taking natural gas and ethane and splitting it with pyrolysis, right? With basically a laser between carbon black and hydrogen, right?
Oh,
and
that's what that arrow. I wondered what that arrow down in just south of me here. What that
that's
arrow
right.
is about.
That's right. And they already have one of their reactors, OC1, that's running. And all of that carbon black is being turned into Tesla Model 3 tires by Michelin up in Canada. Right. And so if you buy a Tesla Model 3 tire, you're buying one of those carbon neutral tires. Right. And right now, all tires are made from carbon black, which are all under environmental consent decrees from the Department of Justice because they kill people who live around them, right? Because of the pollution, right? You're basically just smoking stuff and then collecting smoke. I mean, that's sort of how you make carbon black now, right? And the largest exporter of carbon black in the world is Russia, right? We're going to be the largest exporter of carbon black in the world probably within 10 years. And you know what the byproduct of that is? Hydrogen. And, so in Halo, Nebraska, they're making fertilizer out of it because right now Nebraska gets all their fertilizer from Ukraine using Russian gas, right? That's sent into Tampa and then sent via pipeline from Tampa to Louisiana, and then again from Louisiana up to Omaha. And so now they're going to be making their own fertilizer in Nebraska, which is awesome.
Here, and we haven't even heard of this.
Yeah, we're not even familiar with this, and we're in Nebraska. We probably should have them on the show.
You should, but it's fantastic, right? And so I just think when you think about all the different technologies that we have funded during this LPO and how exciting every one of them is, it's one of those things where we have always been extraordinary at inventing stuff in this country, but we just haven't committed ourselves to tying those inventions to American employment. And now we're doing that.
One of the things that I'm looking through the portfolio, and you've got that map that shows the little area where those different things are. But and that's of course when I saw this, I said, what's going on in Nebraska, right? But the other thing that struck me was the fact when you look at the financials, how many of the loans have been repaid, how much interest has been accrued and paid, and what the default rate for those loans has been. Maybe talk a little bit about that, because
I mean, it's my biggest disappointment, we're supposed to lose money, right? We're supposed to lose money on behalf of the American people to actually, get these technologies commercialized. And along the way, we just haven't taken enough risk. We keep making money for the taxpayer. And I don't understand it. I was like, we're supposed to lose money. What are we doing? They're like, sorry, Jigar. Every one of our bets came through. We didn't have enough losses. Yeah. So, and even when we do lose money, we lose like 15 cents on the dollar, 25 cents on the dollar. Like we don't lose the whole amount. And so, it's one of those things where, even the Congressional Budget Office came back to us and said, you guys aren't losing enough money. Like the way in which we score your loan, we assume you lose a lot more money than you do. Yeah. And so we're going to have to reduce your score so that, basically at this point, giving us more loan authority is free to the American taxpayer because we make money on every dollar we put out the door.
That's nice. That's great to hear. The thing is, that also means that, like you're saying, your risk acceptance or risk tolerance was, not exactly ideal.
Yeah, we have a really good set of professionals that work at the Loan Programs Office, just really extraordinary. But I think the other thing is that I think that people haven't bet on American innovators and entrepreneurs in this country for a long time. And I think part of what we're proving is that it's actually quite profitable to bet on American innovators and entrepreneurs. For a long time, commercial banks in the United States just saw risk. They said, sorry, we just don't want to invest in you unless you're already AAA rated and your name's ExxonMobil. And now we're saying, they've passed every test. They've demonstrated their technology with a US DOE grant. They, got a clean bill of health from the national laboratories, all that stuff. Like, why won't you bet on them? So I think we're proving now that when you bet on the American innovator and entrepreneur, you generally make a good rate of return.
Well, I didn't realize that this was started by the Bush administration. So
yeah, Pete Domenici and all those folks in the Senate and the House. I mean, it was nuts.
So that's great. So what's your sense of what happens now? I'm assuming that there are people still in place and that the wheels of the mechanisms are still turning at LPO. What do you see happening next for that then?
I mean, we played everything straight while I was in office. So we were equally enthusiastic about carbon capture and nuclear and transmission and carbon black and Aspen aerogels and all that stuff. You know, my sense, if I was to guess, is that this administration will have more opinions and say, we're pro the nuclear deals and we're pro the, you know, like sustainable aviation fuel deals, and we're less pro these deals and less pro those deals. And so, but I think the programs office is still going to be busy. I think they're going to put a lot of money out the door. It will just be in certain sectors and not other sectors.
Yeah. Speaking of nuclear, the market was handed a bit of a, I don't want to call it a black swan, but yes, but basically with the announcement of DeepSeek, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, I've learned a long time ago to delete all your news apps because it's all garbage. You know, except for
Hey,
EV
come
World,
on, that's what we're doing here.
Of course, except for EV World. I think that if you look at the underlying growth in data centers, we were at roughly 100 terawatt hours worth of utilization by data centers. That number is going to 400 terawatt hours by the end of the decade. So that's roughly another 25,000 megawatts of load. The rest, most of that is just basic cloud computing increases. It has nothing to do with AI. It just has to do with the fact that people refuse to delete photos off their account. And they just keep paying Apple more money every year because they refuse to delete pictures of their grandchildren. And so like that is what it is, right? And so those data centers are very disruptive to the existing grid, right? And so, like, you know, whether you decide to do solar plus battery storage plus natural gas, or whether you do geothermal, or whether you do nuclear, or whether you do advanced hydro, all of these technologies are going to be used in this next, you know, 12, 15 years, because we're going to need all of it. Like, you know, 73% of everything we interconnected to the grid last year was solar. Great. Yeah. But if we're going to maintain energy abundance, we're going to need nuclear and geothermal and all these other technologies to pull their weight, right? Like it can't just be the solar and wind and battery storage show, even though it probably will be for the next 5 years, because those are the people who are ready to go. But we got to get everyone else ready to go.
Yeah.
There's always questions in the nuclear space about whether people always think nuclear is the answer, but the problem, you get these problems with just the cost of putting in the nuclear power plant versus how cheaply it can produce electricity. Because once it's built, it's not like it's free. You have all these expenses to keep producing that electricity. And it seems like there's new technologies in nuclear that maybe can, you know, be more efficient than the older facilities.
Yeah.
You know, we've talked in here before about how Chernobyl basically set the nuclear industry back. There'd be like 400 more nuclear power plants in the world if Chernobyl hadn't happened, and it really cut investment into nuclear power. All right, when I say 400 more, it was 400 more just in capitalist countries. It wasn't even covering, you know, communist and other totalitarian regimes.
Look, I think there's a long conversation that we can have on nuclear power, and I unfortunately had to read all those books and figure out what the truth was and all that stuff, so we can go through that. But suffice it to say, this goes back to what I've been saying, is that America has to learn how to do big things. All of our nuclear designs are the safest in the world. Our nuclear fleet has been the safest run nuclear fleet in the world. No one has ever died or, you know, gotten, you know, like radiation poisoning from nuclear power in the United States. The Price-Anderson Act, where we provide all the insurance for all the nuclear plants in the entire country, has only paid out $161 million in its entire history, right? And so when you think about just how little nuclear power has been a problem in this country, like we should be doing way more of it. Separately, nuclear is expensive. For sure it's expensive, right, compared to solar, but it runs 24/7. So if you're going to run a fully diversified grid, you're going to need a little bit of everything. Nuclear power was 20% of everything we produce in this country. Today, it's more like 19% or 18% of what we produce. And now we're going to growth again. So even if you just maintain nuclear at 20% forever, you still need to build a lot more nuclear plants, right? And when you look at the transmission lines that we operate today, they are the least utilized transmission grid that we have ever had in the history of transmission in the United States, because we only use it 20% of the time for solar and 40% of the time for wind, right? And so it used to be that our transmission grid was used 70% of the time. It's now used like 45% of the time, right? So part of the reason why you put in a lot of nuclear and geothermal and other clean, firm power generation sources is it better utilizes the transmission we've already paid for, which makes it cheaper, right? And so putting in a lot more nuclear reduces our grid costs by 37.5%, right? And so there are reasons why nuclear power at 9 cents a kilowatt hour still makes the system cheaper than solar at 3 cents a kilowatt hour. And so I would just suggest to everybody that we need all of it. So be for everything that saves carbon emissions, be against nothing. And none of these technologies are competing with each other. We have so much money that we can fund all of it. What we need are projects that are worth funding. And so we need to work hard to create more projects that are worth funding. And then there's plenty of money to fund all of it.
Wow, that's really amazing. I see lots of people trying different things in different spaces, but a lot of times they're just not far enough along that they're ready for something big. And the other thing is, they usually don't necessarily have experience in that space. It's something that it's more of an ideologue, that it's like, well, this is a good idea, but, could we execute? Do we know what's going on? Bill and I, when it comes to hydrogen, we have had some interesting discussion, because one of the more fascinating things we saw was Nikola working with Walmart on using Nikola hydrogen-based trucks for transporting their goods. And Bill and I are like, we're not real bullish on hydrogen. Mainly because right now it's been around for a long time. It's older than really where lithium battery technology is. And at the flip side, it's still like 6 times as expensive as gas, or 3 to 5 times as expensive as gas, probably 12 times as expensive as filling up with electricity. And it doesn't seem like it can make economies of scale, because we saw all of these hydrogen stations close in California and Europe in the last year or two. And it seemed kind of like it's going the wrong direction. But if somebody could revitalize it, it'd be Walmart, right? Walmart's got the clout that if they decided, for instance, that they want their own Walmart delivery vans, they could go all hydrogen.
Well, they're also building tens of thousands of EV chargers at all their facilities nationwide. I think, as like Walmart, I think, is within 10 miles of 90% of the US population. So, they're doing lots of things. Look, I think the thing with hydrogen is that we use 10 million tons of hydrogen a year in the United States right now, right? Mm-hmm. So figuring out how to decarbonize that hydrogen is something we should do, right? And we use it for making fertilizer. We use it for, helping to take sulfur out of our diesel and things at refineries, right? We use it for, lots of things, right? And so if you look at what we have funded out of the Loan Programs Office, there are 3 hydrogen projects we funded. One is the Delta ACES hydrogen storage project in Delta, Utah, where they have salt caverns underneath that coal plant. Each salt cavern can store 150 gigawatt hours worth of hydrogen. And there's 11 of them underneath there, and probably more, right? Wow. And the Western grid has negatively priced power on a regular basis because of so much solar and wind. So every time prices go negative, they make hydrogen. That's a good thing, because the problem with lithium ion batteries is they store power for a couple days. They don't store power for a couple years. But a salt cavern can store it for a couple of years. So long duration energy storage is great. And I don't think you ever turn that hydrogen back into electrons, even though Mitsubishi says you can in their gas turbines. My sense is they'll co-locate a chemical plant or something there, and they'll use that hydrogen and make green chemicals, which is great. Like whatever you do to make it more valuable, I think is fantastic. We also talked about monolith materials, which is a hydrogen deal. They call it turquoise hydrogen. There's some color for everything. And then we also did the Wabash project in Indiana, which is taking pet coke, which is so dirty and so terrible that they actually just bury it into landfills, right? It comes out of the bottom of the refinery stack. And they're taking pet coke and turning that into hydrogen, and then taking the CO2 that comes off that process and burying it in the first Class 6 well that EPA did under the Biden administration. So they figured out a safe way to do it. And again, that is going to be the largest fertilizer facility in Indiana in that region. And so they're not using Ukraine, fertilizer anymore either. They're going to use domestically produced fertilizer, right? Which is great. So there are profitable ways to use hydrogen, and I support all of them. And then there are crazy ways of using hydrogen, and we didn't fund any of those.
Wow. That's interesting to see. What did you think were some of the crazy ideas to use for hydrogen?
I mean, I think a lot of the ones that you mentioned, right? So hydrogen for passenger vehicles don't make any sense. Oh, the fourth one we did was Plug Power, right? So they've got over 100,000 forklift trucks that, power everything at Amazon and Walmart, as well as Procter and Gamble and lots of other places. And, and those forklift trucks have I think it's a 30-day payback, right? Versus batteries, because the problem with batteries is batteries take up about 2 to 4% of the entire warehouse space of a Walmart to do the recharging. And when Walmart gets all that space back, they make so much money on every rack that they're able to put into the warehouse. It's a 30-day payback to switch to hydrogen. So those are going to continue to happen. And Plug Power is now the largest producer of green hydrogen in the United States, and mainly for their own needs. And over time, they'll probably sell them to other people, right? There's hydrogen emergencies all the time, it seems like. And so they get paid top dollar when someone's short on hydrogen and they need a quick hydrogen delivery from Plug Power. And so, Plug's doing great, right? So I think that, again, I'm for everything against nothing. Some of these business models make sense, and some of these business models are terrible, right? But you just got to go through the business model, right? But the goal, so there are some things we funded and some things we obviously said, sorry, these numbers make no sense. And so, but I don't judge American innovators for their creativity. My job is to judge their ability to use a spreadsheet and submit all the paperwork to get a loan out of the office.
Nice. What do you think's been the most satisfying part of having been part of the loan program office?
Well, Bill and I have been convincing for a long time. I got Chelsea Sexton to join the loan programs office with me. So she's a Fed that runs the ATVM program, and she is a legend. So I was so glad that she was willing to join me. So if all I accomplished was getting Chelsea Sexton to be the rock star that she is, then I think we've accomplished everything we need to accomplish in life, Bill. But I think the other piece I would say is that entire time that Bill and Chelsea and I were making mischief, American innovators and entrepreneurs just didn't believe in themselves, right? And when they succeeded at something, they were told by their investors to call their guy in Shanghai and start the process of sending our technology overseas. Every single entrepreneur that I know and their investors are now looking at US sites. Every single one of them.
Good.
Right?
That's great.
And I don't know that they're going to ultimately pick a US site. I don't know that they're ultimately going to build their facility and all that stuff. But man, is that a big change. Right?
Yeah.
And if that's all I accomplished was getting Americans to believe in themselves again, to believe that they can do big things here again, I mean, that's worth it.
When COVID-19 happened and there was all this need for the PPE, the protective gear for medical people and all that, there was nobody manufacturing that stuff in the United States. It was impossible to be cost competitive with the Chinese. And I don't know how that's going to play out, but a lot of companies in the United States over time started making gloves and masks and stuff like that. Now, I kind of wonder if any of those companies are still in business, because it's a struggle when it's so much cheaper. They needed some protections in that space to keep that manufacturing in the U.S. To me, that was a critical piece that the United States needs to be manufacturing, that needs to be made in the U.S. and it's just not because
Well,
of
I mean,
no
look, I
protection.
think we all have to be smart about what we do in the United States. I don't think we can
Mhm.
make every single thing that we consume in the United States, like all those dumb plastic toys that my son likes at 9 years old. Like, I don't know that we should be making all that stuff in the United States. But you know, for things like cars, for
Mhm.
things like fuel, for things like solar panels and batteries and that kind of stuff, I think we should be making them here in the United States, right?
Microprocessors,
What's that?
microprocessors.
Microprocessors. Yeah, I think we should be making those in the United States. But more importantly than that, David, like, you know, if you look at the next generation of technologies and NMC and LFP batteries, China doesn't have any of those technologies. We have all of those technologies. And so the 400 gigawatt hours of battery manufacturing facilities that will be up and running by the end of 27, those facilities can be retrofitted to use the next generation cathode and anode materials that we're inventing here in this country, and they will magically increase their rating to 700 megawatt hours of manufacturing capacity, right? And China
Mhm.
doesn't have any of that technology. But before, we gave it to them for free because we
Right.
were like, well, we're not going to do anything with it. We might as well give it to you to make it, right? Well, now there's a place to put it here. So I hear you that today our batteries might be slightly more expensive than what they can do in China, right? Or today, some of this technology might be more expensive. But after 4 layers of our technology prowess get commercialized and installed, we won't be behind for very much longer, right? But you got to stay the course, right? You got to see it through for 10 years. You can't say, well, we did it for 4 years. Now we're going to reverse course and go back to China.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and by the way, I'm not anti-China. I think China's great. Right. And I've done a lot of business in China. But remember that, like, we have a fragile supply chain system. That's what we learned during COVID. We should
Right.
not have a fragile supply chain system. We shouldn't be getting 92% of our critical minerals from one country, in the same way that we shouldn't get 92% of our oil from one country. And
Right.
so, you know, I think it's important for us to recognize the value of diversification.
So where do you see Jigar Shah here in the next few years?
I mean, you know, maybe I'll join your podcast. I'm a podcaster. I mean,
Yes.
we are bringing back the old Energy Gang podcast. So, you know, Latitude Media will make a big announcement here soon, and I'll be podcasting again. So I'll be in your ears again soon,
Nice.
with my old friends Catherine Hamilton and Stephen Lacey. So I'm super excited about that. But I think honestly, the big thing for me this year is, you know, is just to reconnect with all of my old friends that I haven't talked to in a while. You know, it's a pretty intense 4 years. So
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Oh, and we'd love to do more collaborations.
yeah,
I
it'd
think
be
that would be
great. I
wonderful.
mean, and there's just so many awesome people at the loan programs office that you should be interviewing. I mean,
Yeah,
you know, like
absolutely.
Nathaniel, who is our experts in critical minerals, or Chelsea, of course, who's an expert in everything. But, you know, there's so many people at the manufacturing electricity supply chain office who did all the grants, and they're doing well. I mean, I think we did 1,300 grants and loans over the last 4 years, right? And so
Wow.
there's so many
That's
projects
almost
going.
one a day.
Yeah, there's so many projects going around in our great nation that people just don't know about in their own state.
So
Just look
Bill
at
and I
that
talked
map on the website.
Bill and I
Yeah.
talked about, something fascinating. Yeah, so you know, the Inflation Reduction Act, which was so poorly named, created a crazy amount of jobs in the state of Georgia. So 90% of all
And
the jobs
Nebraska.
yeah, yeah. We just don't know any of those people in Nebraska.
Well,
So
I
you're
can
going to have to
introduce
introduce
you. I
us.
got to know the governor very well in Nebraska. He has an entire team of people who did nothing but make sure that Nebraska did not fall behind on the IRA. And so there's about
That's
7
excellent.
additional projects happening in
Is
Nebraska
that
now.
Pete?
Oh yeah. I mean, he fell off a horse, right? Didn't he get hurt?
Yeah.
Oh, Philip, the Philip.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So,
That's a
Yeah, okay.
that's a normal kind of injury here in Nebraska. Once you get over 80,
well,
they ask you not to, fall off the horses off because it's bad for your hips.
well, I'm glad he's going to make a full recovery, but I think
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff going on in Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, and that's why Burgum was such a huge fan of what we were doing, right? And North Dakota, right? I think Chris Wright was a huge fan out of Colorado, right? Because there were a lot of refineries that, frankly, are at the end of life that want to get reimagined as sustainable aviation fuel. Naphtha and renewable diesel manufacturing facilities like
Right.
we funded in Montana, and so. I just think that people need to be a lot less judgy and a lot more just, pro America doing big things. And I think we're doing them in all 50 states.
So I've seen some great ideas that have both been Republican and Democrat ideas for creating a sovereign wealth fund to boost Social Security, and do very much like the Norwegians, the Saudis, and some other countries, and use this as a vehicle for investing in the United States and have the returns go in to help bolster the Social Security program. And when you're talking about the successes of the Loan Program Office, how it's done so much better than expected, that'd be kind of one of those things that I think there's a lot of things that could fit into a piece there that could have more government involvement and investment in America and could help, right some of the problems with, certain aspects of government.
I feel like you're spreading rumors here, David. I mean, are you saying that the Loan Programs Office and the Social Security Trust Fund are like peanut butter and chocolate? Are we
Well, I
like
don't
the
think those
Reese's
really.
peanut butter cup of
Yeah,
saving Social
they're-
Security? Look, I mean, clearly the risk management at the Loan Programs Office is second to none. And the Social Security Trust Fund needs good ideas. So I'm hopeful that they all work together to figure stuff out. But I just think that in general, we have allowed for, like a lot of this research and development, a lot of this innovation that we've done in the United States to go outside of our borders. And I think it's time for us to commercialize that stuff here. And I think whether that's in the oil and gas space or whether that's in the EV space or whether that's in, like the electricity generation space or all that stuff, we've got great stuff. We have technologies now where you can take the existing right of ways for, like transmission lines, replace that wire, and that the new wire carries 3 times as much power as the old wire. Right? I mean, you can get 3x more out of our grid just by replacing all the wire that's already got existing right-of-ways. We all know it's hard to build new transmission, but existing right-of-ways with new wires that we've invented here. So I think the sky is the limit. We just have to start dreaming a lot bigger around here.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I've learned a lot having you on the show today.
Yeah.
A lot of things I really, I don't think I really expected. Bill, do you have anything more you'd like to cover?
No, I think we pretty well covered it.
No,
Yeah.
Jigar, this has really been a pleasure having you on. And we'll have to look at doing some things again in the future because
Yes,
we've gone on almost an hour. So, and it's just really easy to keep going on. Folks, I want to thank everybody for watching today, and I'll be back tomorrow with engineer Mike Herzog.
I love it. Thanks, guys.